Time now for perspective. After being delayed by the pandemic, the extradition hearing of Julian Assange from Britain to the United States resumes today in London. Prosecutors call him a criminal, his supporters a free speech hero. Assange's WikiLeaks site had published hundreds of thousands of secret diplomatic cables and military files on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. In the United States, he faces 18 charges, adding up to a maximum sentence of 175 years. Assange has sought asylum here in France. And for more, we can speak with a member of his French legal team, Antoine Vey. Mr. Vey, thank you for speaking to France 24. I'd like to begin by asking you, what condition is Julian Assange in? Amnesty International has concerns about his physical and mental well-being.
Well, you have to know that since the beginning of the sanitary crisis in March, no one has been able to visit Julian Assange, physically speaking, not his family, not his father, not his lawyers. So what we know from him is what we know through telephone conversations. And as you are aware, prior to this, an expert from the United Nations had been designated, and he stated that Julian is a victim of torture, and that his physical and mental health are unfortunately not allowing him a proper defense before the tribunal. So we are all very concerned about his state, and we will discover today in what shape he is for real.
A victim of torture. We've also heard concerns from his defense team about the conditions of the prison in Britain, as well as what conditions he would be in the United States if he were to be extradited. Can you tell us specifically what these concerns are over those conditions?
Well, first of all, is detained in a high security prison, like a terrorist. Knowing that whatever people think about Julian Assange is not someone who is prosecuted for murdering people or any bodily harm or injuries, he is completely isolated with no possibility to go out of his cell 23 hours a day. And he doesn't have no contacts, easy contacts, medical medications. So eventually what is really striking in this case is that the whole international community is not raising up in order to point out that there is absolutely no reason today why Julian Assange is still detained. He's someone who is not violent, is very identified. He could have stayed out of the jail in order to prepare his defense. And of course, we fear that if he were to be extradited to the United States, his detention would be even worse. So it's really a very important issue that is decided at the moment in London. And we hope that all people, all countries will consider this and try to understand this case.
Does that make you think that this case is not so much one that's criminal, but maybe more of a political case?
Well, it's not at all a criminal case. It's not at all a typical case where you face charges and you understand what you have been reproached of and you can defend yourself. It's purely, uniquely political one. I have to state, and it's very difficult to explain it to the people, but the prosecution started in 2019 for facts that actually remounts to 2010. So it took 9 years for the United States to actually formalize any kind of accusation. And nowadays, when you read the accusation, you don't actually find anything concrete that would justify Julian Assange spending the last 10 years of his life under constant surveillance, under constant pressure, and now facing a trial that we think and we consider would probably be the end of Julian Assange as a person, because his health condition is so weak that we don't think he could face a trial in the United States at the moment.
And those proceedings beginning at the Old Bailey today in London, this is expected to play out over the coming weeks. How do you think it will ultimately conclude?
Well, to be quite honest, we are both optimistic on the grounds that we are raising, because they are, in this kind of case, one of the strongest case we can have in extradition process. But we are at the same time very pessimistic because we know that it's not a normal trial. For example, the way the trial has been organized so far is very striking to us. No one has been able to see him. His lawyer were not able to prepare his defense. Today, most of the people intervening will intervene via video conference, and it's very unusual. So eventually, we just expect and we just hope that at one point someone will raise his finger and say, look, this cannot happen this way. The United States cannot prosecute someone in these circumstances, and we would consider that the international community should stand up and really try to ensure that at least he has a fair trial.
And in doing so, you've appealed to France for asylum. You replaced Eric Dupond-Moretti on Assange's European defense team. Dupond-Moretti, of course, France's justice minister at the moment. Where does Assange's case for asylum here in France stand?
Well, first of all, you have to know that in order to seek asylum for Assange, he has to be on the French soil, which is not the case. So our aim is to inform the head of the state of the reality of the case. We think that he has been misinformed. So we are building up a case in order to try and obtain from Emmanuel Macron a statement that would back our vision of justice. Of course, it's an American accusation. It's an American problem. But I think that all countries in the world have to stand for the rule of law. So at the moment, we are building up this case. It's very technical. We have to remember that Julian has children in France, that WikiLeaks was operated from France, and we expect France to have a clear message to the United States. Of course, also from Germany, Switzerland, and other countries, in order to put forward a vision of justice that is different from the political accusation that is facing at the moment.
You mentioned standing for the rule of law. I'm guessing justice authorities in the States think they are doing just that. What's the demarcation between national security and whistleblowing or free speech? Where do you draw the line for those two elements?
Well, first of all, when you speak about national security, I have to remind you that although they were arguing for a large moment that the publication of the diplomatic cables were putting people at risk, they withdraw this accusation because the United States are not able to demonstrate the actual risk and the actual people who would have been threatened by this divulgation of information. Secondly, you have to consider what is he actually prosecuted for at the moment. He's prosecuted for having published informations that are true, they are not, contested, and that shows for most of them that the United States do not respect the rule of law while they're acting for their national interests. I think that if anyone who is actually publishing real informations that demonstrates crimes are committed is facing this kind of accusation, it's really a bad move for freedom of speech, freedom of information. And it's true that there is probably a split in the culture between the American and the French ones. French would not actually envision even a trial like that.
All right, Mr. Vey, I'm sorry, we've run out of time. We have to leave it there, but thank you very much for your analysis and being a guest here on Perspective.